What happens when the most humiliated child in an empire lives long enough to rewrite its laws? In blood. In Constantinople's grand Hippodrome, a naked girl lay still as trained geese pecked food from her skin. Thousands cheered. Coins rained down. She was 10. That girl would grow up to orchestrate the slaughter of 30,000 people in that same arena. This is not a survival story. This is what happens when pain is weaponized. Let's uncover the real Theodora, only on Torture Legacy. Theodora didn't rise. She clawed her way out of hell. Before the crown, before the laws, before the blood-soaked arena that bent to her will, she was a child thrown to animals. Stripped before 80,000 people who mistook her agony for applause. They didn't see a girl. They saw a spectacle. She never forgot their faces. She was 10 when the Hippodrome swallowed her. The same arena that crowned emperors also broke children. And Theodora, poor, powerless female, was offered to it like meat. Not for entertainment, for ritualized humiliation. But humiliation became education. Every jeer taught her what made crowds cheer. Every coin hurled at her skin became currency she would one day weaponize. They called her names. But behind her silence, she was studying. Studying how empires work, how men collapse under desire, and how shame, properly wielded, becomes control. History remembers her as empress. The law calls her a reformer. Religion even gave her a halo. But this story strips the marble away. This is not the tale of a saint. This is the anatomy of a predator, one built from pain, fed by vengeance, and armed with a memory so sharp it could kill. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe. Tomorrow we uncover the queen who slaughtered her audience. Before the fall, there was a name, Acacius, the bearkeeper. He wasn't noble, but he mattered. A man of muscle and rank, Acacius trained beasts for the Green faction, one of two political forces that ruled Constantinople like gangs with Senate seats. His family was protected, not by law, but by affiliation, until he died, and everything they had was stolen with a handshake. By custom, the job, and its privileges, should have passed to his widow. The system, corrupt as it was, had rules, but Asterius, a petty official who controlled entertainment appointments, sold the position for a bribe. Just like that, Theodora's family was discarded. No protest, no hearing, just silence. Her mother, a widow with 3 daughters, found herself outside the gates of survival. There was no safety net. There was only one currency left, her children's bodies. So she made a decision history would never forget, because Theodora never let it be forgotten. One morning she dressed her daughters in laurel wreaths, symbols of victory twisted into signals of submission. She led them into the Hippodrome, paraded them in front of the crowd, not as performers, but as offerings. No one stopped her. The Greens, who owed their loyalty to Acacius, turned their backs. The Blues, historic enemies of the Greens, offered her stepfather a minor position, not out of compassion, but politics. It was enough. Enough to feed them. Enough to mark Theodora forever. In that moment, something inside her calcified. Not grief, not shame, strategy. She realized loyalty was fiction, that alliances were currency, and that survival belonged not to the virtuous, but to the vengeful. They called it theater, but it was a marketplace for flesh. By 10, Theodora was no longer a child. She was product. Her stage, the Hippodrome, her costume, skin, her act, pain, choreographed for applause. She was trained for a performance called Leda and the Swan. The concept was borrowed from myth. The execution was medieval. She would lie naked on stone, barley scattered across her stomach. Then came the geese, trained birds pecking seed from her skin as the crowd howled in delight. Senators, priests, judges, men who passed laws in the morning and paid for degradation by night. They threw coins at her, not into her hands, at her body. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they didn't, but they never looked away, and neither did she. Theodora didn't weep. She didn't scream. She watched, memorized. Every man who came backstage thinking she was helpless, she filed away. What made them smirk? What made them beg? What made them pay more? Back then, the law didn't protect child performers, it erased them. Actresses were legally defined as prostitutes. That one word turned performance into consent, childhood into currency, and silence into survival. What broke others trained her. Night after night, she learned that men who ruled nations collapsed under their own cravings. That dignity was paper thin. That power could be bought, bent, and, eventually, broken. The Hippodrome was never a stage. It was a lab. And Theodora, she was conducting an experiment. She left the Hippodrome in silk, not as a girl saved, but as a girl acquired. Hebus, the Syrian governor of Libya, had seen her perform once. That was enough. He didn't want a night. He wanted possession. He offered her escape from the arena in exchange for servitude in his palace. And Theodora, 17 and exhausted, said yes. But luxury wasn't liberation. It was just a different kind of cage. In Libya, she slept on linen, bathed in oils, and ate what she once begged for. But none of it was free. Hebus believed he owned her soul, that his wealth gave him control. That desire could buy obedience. He had no idea what he'd imported. Theodora didn't rebel. She studied, like always. She learned what made him flinch, what words softened him, which touches turned his thoughts into fog. She didn't love him. She dissected him. Every night was a new data set, how far she could push, how quickly he'd fold, and then she began to whisper about politics, about taxes, about trade alliances. At first he listened, then he obeyed. Then he realized. Too late. One night, in a rage, Hebus screamed, "You think you rule me?" He hurled her things into the sand, stripped her of title, jewels, and status, ordered her gone. But he was wrong. She didn't think she ruled him. She knew she had, because she had tested a theory, and it worked. Power wasn't about thrones, it was about proximity to male weakness. And Theodora had just mapped it like a general drawing plans for war. She didn't return from Libya in shame. She returned in formation. Stripped of comfort, Theodora began her crawl back to Constantinople, not by road, but by sea. No patron, no protection, just her body and what she'd learned. That desire was leverage, and pity was currency if you knew how to spend it. On the first ship, she was offered passage in exchange for conversation. By the end of the trip, she knew the merchant's trade routes, smuggling contacts, and where his wife slept when he traveled. On the next, she met a Roman captain who insisted he wanted just her company. He gave her wine. She gave him silence, until he bragged about bribing customs officers in Cyrene. She listened. He confessed. And when the ship docked, she vanished. Each port was a dossier. Each man, a lesson in ego. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was compiling. When she reached Alexandria, she didn't seek wealth. She sought shelter, and found it in the most unlikely place: religion. Under the guidance of Patriarch Timothy III, she joined the Monophysite sect, not out of faith but calculation. It was a resistance church, persecuted, marginalized, angry, just like her. There, for the first time, she wasn't seen as property. She was seen as potential. Theodora adopted the robes, the prayers, the pose. But beneath the veil, the predator remained, now cloaked in ideology. In Antioch, she met Macedonia, another survivor, another performer, and more importantly, a carrier of news. Macedonia returned to Constantinople with whispers. She's alive. She's different. She's coming. Theodora stood on the deck of the final ship home as Constantinople came into view. She wasn't the same girl who'd been sold on its stage. Now she had no master, and no mercy left. The city hadn't changed, but Theodora had become unrecognizable. She returned not with gifts or status, but with precision. She aligned herself with the Blues, the same faction that once offered her family scraps when the Greens left them to starve. But she didn't return as a victim seeking favor. She returned as a variable injected into the bloodstream of power. And soon, she caught his attention. Justinian, nephew of the emperor, heir to the Byzantine throne, brilliant, isolated, obsessed with reform, and vulnerable to admiration. He didn't know what she was. He thought she was an anomaly, a woman who could quote law, challenge logic, and listen without submission. To him, she was a revelation. To her, he was an open system. She never seduced. She synchronized. He spoke of bureaucracy. She offered fixes. He mentioned corruption. She mapped out culprits. He whispered frustrations. She finished his thoughts. By the time he realized he needed her, it was too late. She wasn't beside him. She was inside him. The court panicked. The Senate sneered. How could the future emperor be entangled with a woman whose past was written in sweat and blood? Even Empress Euphemia, wife of the reigning emperor, declared war. But Justinian wouldn't bend, and Theodora wouldn't blink. In her silence, something darker moved. A month later, Euphemia was dead. No illness, no warning, no evidence. Just a perfect gap where resistance once stood. Theodora never claimed credit. She didn't have to. Because within days, the law changed. Former actresses were now allowed to marry high-ranking men. No fanfare, just a signature on parchment. But everyone knew that wasn't legislation. It was a wedding invitation. Justinian believed he was falling in love. Theodora knew better. He was being reconstructed. Every conversation rewired him. Every moment of silence reframed his certainty. She didn't manipulate his heart. She reprogrammed his parameters. He thought she was inspiration. In reality, she was infiltration. She learned quickly that Justinian didn't crave beauty. He craved being understood, and Theodora made it her mission to understand him better than he understood himself. She echoed his dreams back to him with better words. She anticipated his doubts and offered pre-approved solutions. When he confessed vulnerabilities, she didn't comfort. She reinforced, until he stopped thinking alone. Soon, he stopped thinking without her. The relationship wasn't romantic, it was architectural. She built herself into the framework of his ambition. So when he imagined ruling an empire, she was already standing next to him on the throne in his mind. The court erupted in outrage. The Senate accused him of disgrace. One senator spat, "You would crown a whore." But Justinian held his ground, not out of courage, but compulsion. He needed her, and that was no accident. Theodora didn't fight his enemies. She turned them into static. She didn't rise above their judgment. She buried it under obsession. Euphemia's death had already cleared the legal path. Now Justinian walked it, eyes wide open, will not his own. The wedding was held in the Hagia Sophia. Marble gleamed, purple flowed, and as Theodora stepped into imperial light, the crowd whispered, prayed, or watched in silence. No one applauded, because everyone understood. This wasn't a love story. It was a takeover. The Hippodrome had once devoured her. Now, it would feed her. January 532 CE, Constantinople ignited. The blues and greens, enemies for generations, united for the first time. But their target wasn't Justinian, it was her. The chants echoed through the city. Death to the whore empress. Crowds surged, buildings burned. The Hagia Sophia, the Senate house, engulfed. In the palace, Justinian trembled. His advisors begged him to flee. The docks were ready, the treasury already loaded onto ships. His hand shook as he reached for escape. Then Theodora stood, wrapped in imperial silk, her voice sliced through smoke. "If you must run, run. But I was born into nothing. I will not die as nothing. Royalty is a fine burial shroud." It wasn't a speech, it was command. She understood mobs. She had performed for them, been sacrificed to them, survived them. And now she would end them. Her plan: trap the rebellion in the very arena that once stripped her soul. She ordered the generals, Belisarius and Mundus, to wait until the rebels gathered inside the Hippodrome to crown their puppet emperor, then seal the exits and butcher them. No trial, no negotiation, no survivors. The gates slammed shut like the jaws of a beast, and then the killing began. Swords, arrows, screams. By sunset, 30,000 corpses soaked the same sand where Theodora once lay naked for coins. But she didn't blink. She watched from the royal box, the same spot where men once jeered at her pain. Now they died beneath her feet. It wasn't revenge, it was restoration. The Hippodrome had humiliated her, now it obeyed her. Theodora didn't just survive the Hippodrome. She wrote laws to make sure no one else walked out of it alive the way she did. With the blood still drying on the arena floor, she and Justinian began rebuilding the empire. But while his reforms were about structure, hers were about scars. She outlawed forced prostitution because she had lived it. She ordered brothels to be shut if they restricted women from leaving, because she had once been trapped. She made rape punishable by death, no exceptions for rank or robe. She expanded divorce rights. She stripped abusive men of property. She ensured that shame would no longer protect the powerful. It would expose them. But her justice came with edges. She created the Metanoia convent, a sanctuary for former prostitutes, funded by the crown. But it wasn't freedom. It was confinement in robes. Women entered as victims. They emerged, if ever, as obedient relics. Because liberation, to Theodora, was not the absence of chains. It was the transfer of who held the key. She didn't stop at women. She broke families who opposed her, dissolved marriages that threatened her influence, turned noble bloodlines into tools for dynastic manipulation. If you had a daughter, and she was beautiful, Theodora decided whom she married. If you had a secret and it touched lust, she already knew it. If you had power, you kept it only if she let you. She didn't seek equality. She sought domination, built on the bones of everything that once destroyed her. Theodora died on June 28, 548 CE. No screams, no spectacle, just silence. Her death wasn't dramatic, but its absence was. Justinian shattered. He ruled 17 more years, but history stopped whispering his name when hers disappeared. He never remarried. He never recovered. Because she hadn't been his wife. She'd been his architecture. After her death, the laws stopped evolving. The court grew timid. The empire, once aggressive, became passive. Because she hadn't just ruled with him, she had programmed him. Her mosaics still stare from basilica walls, robed in imperial purple, haloed like a saint. But look closer. Her face is unreadable, not pleading, not forgiving, knowing. She's not offering salvation. She's reminding you. She remembers. The Hippodrome stands to this day. Tourists laugh, take selfies, pose on ancient stones, unaware they tread the graveyard of 30,000 corpses and the ashes of a child once sold for applause. They don't see the blood. But Theodora did. Every day, she never healed. She harnessed. Her story isn't a triumph of the human spirit. It's a warning. Some survivors don't forgive. They become architects of fear, and they rebuild the world that broke them in their image. Theodora's life forces us to confront a terrifying truth. Trauma doesn't always break people. Sometimes it builds them into instruments of ruthless precision. She wasn't healed, she was sharpened. Every scar became a compass, every humiliation, a formula. And when she finally reached power, she didn't offer forgiveness. She offered structure, made from the very systems that once consumed her. We often glorify strong women in history, but Theodora challenges that narrative. She wasn't strong in the way we celebrate. She didn't uplift. She outmaneuvered. She didn't comfort. She controlled. And yet, can we blame her? When society teaches a child that submission is survival, is it any surprise that domination becomes her justice? Her story is a mirror for patriarchy, for law, for how civilizations process shame. She turned pain into empire, the Hippodrome into a graveyard, love into control, and reform into revenge. So ask yourself, what would you become if the only power anyone ever gave you was your ability to suffer? If this story shook you, don't look away. Hit like, comment, and subscribe to support bold, brutal history. We tell stories others won't touch, the ones that cut deep, haunt long, and force you to rethink what power really is. Turn on notifications so you don't miss tomorrow's episode. Because if you thought this was dark, you haven't seen what's coming. Now we want to hear from you. Do you believe Theodora was justified? Or did she become the very monster that created her? Drop your thoughts below, and remember, history isn't just about dates, it's about damage.